Hello Zenith women and welcome to the channel. The hardest chains to break are the ones someone refuses to wear. In a world obsessed with labels and hierarchies, the Sigma stands as an enigmatic force, unbound, unshaken, and utterly unbothered by societal expectations. Did you know that studies in psychology reveal the most resistant individuals often derive strength from their independence, making external pressure not only ineffective but counterproductive? It's like trying to bend water with your hands. No matter how hard you push, it simply flows around you. Sigmas are the wild cards of society, living outside the rules that others cling to. And here's the kicker. Every attempt to break them doesn't just fail. It backfires spectacularly. Instead of crumbling, they thrive. Instead of conforming, they slip further out of reach, leaving those who tried to change them questioning their own sanity. Breaking a Sigma isn't just a losing battle. It's a reminder that the true rebel doesn't fight to win, they fight to remain untouched. But why is that? Why do all attempts to crack the code of a Sigma end up looking like a bad episode of Mission Impossible? Let's dive into the brutal, fascinating truth. Number 1. Control attempts feel predictable to them. Sigmas have an uncanny ability to see through the patterns of human behavior, which makes control attempts feel predictable and frankly boring to them. They've spent their lives observing how people act, especially in moments of manipulation. And they've become experts at identifying the subtle cues that most would miss. They notice the sudden shift in tone, the strategically placed guilt, the veiled threats disguised as advice. All of it registers before the words even fully leave the other person's mouth. This predictability is exactly why efforts to break a Sigma fail. They've already run the scenario in their mind and anticipated the next move, sometimes before you've even realized you're making it. It's like trying to outmaneuver someone who's read the playbook of your intentions and written the counter-strategy. You may think you're being clever or persuasive, but to them it's just another tired act in a performance they've seen far too many times. Here's the kicker. Because they see it coming, they don't even have to respond with resistance. They simply sidestep the attempt entirely, leaving you grappling with your own failed strategy. This non-reaction can be infuriating for those trying to manipulate them because it feels like throwing punches into thin air. Sigmas thrive in this quiet defiance. Their ability to see control attempts as formulaic strips them of any emotional weight. The harder someone tries to control or reshape them, the more they quietly disengage, mentally placing the situation into the category of not worth my energy. And that's where the ultimate backfire occurs, because the more predictable the tactic, the less of a fight the Sigma gives. They've already won without lifting a finger, leaving others wondering how they lost control so completely. Number 2. They are masters of subtle defiance. Sigmas have perfected the art of saying no without ever uttering the word. Their resistance isn't loud, confrontational, or packed with grand gestures. Instead, it's subtle, quiet, and almost imperceptible at first glance. This understated defiance drives those trying to break them absolutely mad because it offers nothing to grab onto. No outbursts, no arguments, no dramatic displays to dissect or manipulate. What makes this so effective is its simplicity. Sigmas don't announce their opposition, they just don't comply. They'll nod politely, perhaps even offer a vague smile. But when the time comes to follow through, they're nowhere near the path someone tried to steer them toward. Their silence isn't passive, it's strategic. It forces the other person to fill the void with assumptions, second-guessing, and eventually frustration. This subtlety leaves manipulators and enforcers disarmed. Most people expect resistance to come with emotion, anger, tears, pleading. Those reactions can be exploited, but with a Sigma, there's none of that. Their quiet defiance becomes a blank slate onto which others project their own insecurities, doubts, or fears. Over time, the effort to control them starts to feel like fighting smoke, exhausting, fruitless, and increasingly pointless. The brilliance of this approach lies in its efficiency. Sigmas conserve their energy by refusing to engage in power struggles on someone else's terms. They don't waste time arguing about expectations they never agreed to in the first place. Instead, they let the tension dissipate on its own, leaving their would-be challengers frustrated and bewildered. It's not about winning or losing for a Sigma. It's about never letting the game begin at all. And in doing so, they remain untouchable, quietly shaping their own destiny while others scramble to figure out how they slipped away unnoticed. Number 3. They don't play by rules you understand. When dealing with a Sigma, the first mistake people make is assuming they're playing the same game as everyone else. They're not. While most people navigate life by adhering to established norms and rules, seeking approval, following hierarchies, and competing within familiar frameworks, Sigmas exist outside those boundaries entirely. They don't reject the rules to be rebellious. They simply see no reason to follow a system that doesn't align with their internal principles. This divergence creates a fundamental disconnect. Imagine thinking you're engaged in a chess match, meticulously planning your moves, only to realize halfway through that your opponent isn't even using the chessboard. Sigmas dismantle the board and create their own game, one with rules you can't understand because they're tailored specifically to their unique perspective. This isn't arrogance, it's pragmatism. To them, following someone else's rules is a waste of time and energy when they can create more effective paths on their own. The brilliance of this mindset is that it renders attempts to control or break them utterly useless. Strategies designed to manipulate someone operating within conventional frameworks, like social pressure, fear of isolation, or appeals to authority, fall flat because they hold no significance in the Sigma's world. You can't trap someone with rules they've already discarded. What's even more frustrating for those trying to impose control is that Sigmas don't go out of their way to explain themselves. Their actions might seem random or illogical from the outside, but every choice they make is deeply rooted in their own logic, one that prioritizes independence, efficiency, and authenticity over conformity. In the end, trying to break a Sigma within the confines of your own understanding is an exercise in futility. You're playing a game they're not interested in, and by the time you realize it, they've already moved on, leaving you with nothing but a dismantled board and a lot of unanswered questions. Number 4. Efforts to break them reveal insecurities in others. Trying to break a Sigma is like holding up a magnifying glass to your own insecurities. It reveals more about you than it ever does about them. Sigmas, with their calm detachment and unshakable independence, have a way of exposing the hidden motives behind someone's need to control or fix them. They don't resist in ways that can be easily explained or confronted. Instead, their very existence challenges the assumptions and expectations that others depend on to feel secure. When someone tries to force a Sigma into conformity, what often surfaces is their own unspoken fear. The fear of losing control, being invalidated, or being shown that their way of living isn't the only or even the best way. A Sigma's refusal to play by traditional rules can feel like a personal affront to those who need external validation to feel whole. The Sigma doesn't need the approval of others, and this lack of dependence can make people question why they themselves are so desperate to gain it. This dynamic creates a fascinating irony. The harder someone pushes to reshape a Sigma, the more their own insecurities bubble to the surface. A manager trying to assert authority over a Sigma employee might unintentionally reveal their fragile ego. A friend attempting to guilt a Sigma into behaving a certain way might expose their fear of abandonment. In every case, the Sigma remains unaffected, while the person trying to control them is left grappling with their own unresolved issues. The Sigma doesn't do this intentionally. They're not trying to provoke or humiliate. They simply act as a mirror, reflecting the motivations, flaws, and insecurities of those who engage with them. And this is precisely why efforts to break a Sigma always backfire. Instead of changing the Sigma, they end up confronting parts of themselves they didn't even realize were there. Number 5. They have nothing to lose. Sigmas operate with a unique kind of freedom. They have nothing to lose because they've deliberately detached from the things most people use to control others. While society often ties identity to material wealth, relationships, or status, Sigmas don't place their sense of self-worth in any of these external factors. This detachment isn't born out of apathy, but a conscious choice to value independence above all else. This mindset makes traditional leverage tactics useless against them. Threaten their job? they'll find another one or create their own path. Try to shame them by questioning their social standing? They couldn't care less about how others perceive them. Even personal relationships, while meaningful, are not something a Sigma clings to out of fear or need. They engage with people because they want to, not because they have to. This refusal to be tethered to conventional attachments creates an unshakable resilience. People trying to manipulate or break them often rely on exploiting what someone fears losing: a reputation, a sense of belonging, financial stability. But with Sigmas, those fears don't exist in the same way. They've already stripped away the unnecessary layers, leaving nothing behind that can be used as a bargaining chip. Ironically, this detachment can be deeply unsettling to others. It challenges the assumption that everyone has a breaking point tied to what they hold dear. For Sigmas, their only true loss would be their autonomy, and that's the one thing they will fiercely protect. This makes them not only difficult to control, but nearly impossible to break. They are playing a game where they've removed the stakes entirely, leaving others scrambling to figure out how to compete with someone who simply cannot be cornered. Number 6. Attempts to break them are an admission of their power. The very effort to break a Sigma is a silent confession. Their presence matters more than anyone is willing to admit. Sigmas by nature operate outside societal norms, yet their independence and refusal to conform often draw the most attention. Ironically, the harder someone tries to reshape or control them, the more they highlight the Sigma's undeniable power and autonomy. People don't waste energy on someone irrelevant. The act of attempting to fix or break a Sigma is an unspoken acknowledgement of their influence. Whether it's their ability to disrupt expectations, their magnetic individuality, or the quiet strength they exude, Sigmas challenge the status quo just by existing. And that challenge can feel threatening to those who thrive on structure, control, or conformity. The attempt to reshape them isn't about the Sigma fitting in. It's about those around them regaining their sense of dominance or balance. But here's the twist. Every effort to diminish a Sigma inadvertently amplifies their position. Trying to enforce rules on someone who doesn't follow them only makes those rules look arbitrary. Attempting to undermine their autonomy exposes how much autonomy they actually possess, and each failed attempt to control them becomes a testament to their resilience. This dynamic often leaves the aggressor in a paradox. The more they push, the more significant the Sigma becomes. They end up elevating the very person they were trying to suppress, often to a level of influence they didn't even intend. Meanwhile, the Sigma remains unaffected, quietly observing the chaos they've unintentionally caused, standing as a living reminder of the power of individuality. Attempts to break them don't just fail. They end up making the Sigma's unshakable autonomy impossible to ignore. Number 7. Sigmas don't fight battles that don't matter. One of the most confounding things about Sigmas is their ability to disengage completely from battles that others consider crucial. While most people are drawn into arguments, power struggles, or attempts to prove a point, Sigmas take one look, assess the stakes, and simply walk away if it's not worth their time. Their indifference isn't laziness or cowardice. It's a calculated refusal to waste energy on things that don't align with their values or goals. This drives those trying to break them absolutely insane. Control and manipulation often rely on provoking an emotional response, anger, fear, or even desperation, but Sigmas rarely take the bait. Instead, they respond with an unshakable calm, as if saying, "This isn't my fight, and it never will be." Their refusal to engage leaves their would-be challengers floundering, unsure how to proceed without the expected pushback. What makes this even more frustrating is that their indifference isn't theatrical. It's quiet, unassuming, and absolute. They don't throw a tantrum, storm out, or make a grand statement about why they're disengaging. They just stop caring. And that quiet exit speaks louder than any argument ever could. For Sigmas, the logic is simple. Why invest energy in something that doesn't matter? They don't feel the need to prove their worth to others, defend themselves against baseless accusations, or bend to someone else's expectations. This level of detachment is their superpower, It disarms manipulative tactics before they even have a chance to take root. The ultimate irony? The more someone tries to drag a Sigma into a fight, the more obvious it becomes that the battle was never worth fighting in the first place. The Sigma walks away, and the other person is left grappling with the hollow victory of winning a fight that only they cared about. Number 8. They're resilient in the face of failure. Failure is kryptonite for most people, but for a Sigma, it's just another tool in their arsenal. While many see failure as a setback or a reflection of their worth, Sigmas view it as a natural and necessary part of growth. They don't fear it, they don't run from it, and they certainly don't let it define them. Instead, they analyze it, learn from it, and move forward stronger than before. This resilience makes them nearly impossible to break. Attempts to use failure as a weapon, whether it's by orchestrating their downfall, pointing out their mistakes, or reveling in their missteps, completely miss the mark. Sigmas don't internalize failure as shame or weakness. They see it as feedback, a way to refine their approach or adapt their strategies. What might crush someone else's spirit only sharpens a Sigma's focus. What sets them apart is their ability to detach emotionally from the idea of losing. To a Sigma, failure isn't a dead end, it's just another step on the path. They don't dwell on what went wrong or spiral into self-doubt. Instead, they dissect the situation with almost clinical precision, finding the lesson buried in the rubble and using it to fortify their resilience. This mindset is infuriating to those who try to break them because failure, which is usually a reliable control tactic, simply doesn't stick. The more setbacks a Sigma faces, the more adaptable and determined they become. Their ability to treat failure as fuel rather than defeat turns what should be a vulnerability into an unshakable strength. In the end, those who try to use failure against a Sigma often find themselves outmatched by someone who refuses to be defeated, and who comes back stronger every single time. Number 9. The cost of breaking a Sigma is often greater than the reward. Trying to break a Sigma can be an exhausting, emotionally draining endeavor, one that often results in little to no return on investment. Those who attempt to manipulate, control, or reshape a Sigma quickly find themselves spending far more emotional, mental, or even social energy than they ever anticipated. From engaging in endless conversations to applying pressure, guilt, or forceful tactics, it can feel like a constant battle that demands more and more resources. Yet in the end, the Sigma remains as they were, unmoved, unchanged, and unaffected. This stark contrast between effort and result is where the real cost lies. People expect that by applying enough stress, frustration, or persuasion, they can break down a Sigma's walls or convince them to conform. But Sigmas are often impervious to such tactics. Their self-sufficiency, emotional detachment, and independence render external forces almost powerless. All the energy poured into trying to fix them simply goes to waste, while they stand firm, unchanged, and unfazed. For those trying to break a Sigma, the effort becomes a paradox. They pour all their resources into a battle that doesn't move the needle, only to find themselves drained and defeated, while the Sigma stands resilient. This emotional toll often extends beyond the immediate situation. Trying to control or change someone who isn't susceptible to manipulation can leave you questioning your own motives, self-worth, and boundaries. It's not just a personal failure, it's an exhausting exercise in futility. The true cost, however, is not just in time or energy, but in the realization that the Sigma was never the one in need of change. By the end of this struggle, it's often the ones trying to break the Sigma who are left worse off, emotionally depleted, mentally strained, and socially exhausted, while the Sigma remains resolute, untouched, and free. The cost of breaking a Sigma is rarely worth the reward, because the reward itself is nothing more than a hollow victory in a game they never played. Number 10. Resistance strengthens their identity. When someone tries to change a Sigma, they're not attacking their weaknesses. They're solidifying their strengths. Sigmas don't bend under pressure. Instead, they absorb it, using the resistance as fuel to bolster their sense of self. Every attempt to reshape or control them serves as a reminder of their autonomy and the power of their independence. They don't see conflict as a burden, but as a challenge to their identity. a test they're determined to pass, no matter how many times it's thrown their way. Rather than breaking them down, attempts to break a sigma only strengthen their resolve. For someone who values independence above all else, being pushed to conform or adapt feels like an affirmation that their chosen path is the right one. It's almost as if every external attempt to pressure them into compliance provides another reason to dig in their heels. They don't see resistance as something to avoid. They see it as the very thing that reinforces their identity. In a strange way, conflict makes sigmas more certain of who they are. When the world pressures them to conform, their response isn't to cave in. It's to stand taller, more resolute in their beliefs and choices. The more someone tries to reshape them, the more they reaffirm their commitment to remain untouched by external forces. They don't need validation or approval. Their sense of self is built on an unshakable foundation that only gets stronger when tested. For those trying to break a sigma, this is the ultimate frustration. Every effort to manipulate or control them becomes a lesson in futility. The harder they push, the harder the sigma pushes back, not with visible defiance, but with a quiet, unyielding resistance that only strengthens their sense of who they are. The battle ends up being an exercise in self-realization for the sigma, while those trying to control them are left wondering why their tactics only make the sigma more unbreakable. In the end, trying to break a sigma isn't just a futile exercise. It's a revealing journey for both parties. Sigmas, with their unshakable independence, emotional resilience, and fierce commitment to their values, are not merely unbreakable. They are mirrors that reflect the insecurities, contradictions, and flaws of those who try to manipulate or control them. The more someone attempts to reshape them, the more they expose their own vulnerabilities and weaknesses, often leaving them worse off than when they started. Sigmas don't need to fight back, for their very existence challenges the norms and forces others to confront their own limitations. The beauty of the sigma isn't in their resistance. It's in their ability to remain steadfast and true to themselves in a world that constantly tries to impose conformity. They don't seek validation, control, or approval because they've already found those things within themselves. And in a world where so many bend and break under pressure, sigmas stand as a testament to the power of independence, authenticity, and quiet strength. In trying to break them, you only affirm the undeniable truth. Sigmas can't be broken, and those who try will only reveal their own fragility in the process. If you've made it this far, you've already glimpsed the power and resilience that comes from embracing the sigma mindset. But trust me, this is just the beginning. If you want more insights, more revelations, and more ways to break free from the norms that try to shape you, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Don't miss out on the next level of content that'll keep you sharp, empowered, and ready to tackle whatever life throws your way. Join this community of independent thinkers who refuse to be broken. Hit subscribe now, and let's keep this journey going.